Thank you for joining us. Today, we are taking up a very important and timely topic of tariffs, protectionism, and industrial that can be linked to industrial policies as well. And you know that in the last few decades, we saw a growth of liberalization with tariffs almost getting nearly to zero, and everybody was pushing for free trade. But now, since last few years, the tariffs are back very much in the policy as well as in the sometimes in the research, as we see some research on industrial policies as well. We do not typically talk about protectionism, but it talks really about protecting some of the industries, some of the key industries, and then we are seeing the escalation of tariffs from the US, especially, and this has generated a large wave of, you can say, unrest throughout the world. So on this topic today, we have Dr. Waqar Wadho. Dr. Waqar Wadho is Associate Professor of Economics and Director Graduate Studies at Lahore School of Economics. He is also a Senior Research Fellow at Center for Research in Economics and Business, CREB. Further to this, he is also a Research Fellow at the Center of Economic Research in Pakistan. He is Fellow at Global Labour Organization and member of HEC Subcommittee on Economics of Committee for the Development of Social Sciences and Humanities in Pakistan. He holds a PhD from France and MSc Economics from Quaid-e-Azam University, Pakistan. So, Dr. Waqar, I welcome you to this discussion, and I thank you for sparing time from your busy schedule and joining us.
Thank you so much, Nadeem, and thank you for introduction. Hello, everyone, and really looking forward to all the questions that you could have. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you. So this discussion will go forward in a way that first I will have some discussion with Dr. Waqar, and after that we will open this forum for question and answer. If you have any question, meanwhile, you can put this in the chat box as well. Otherwise, at the end, I will allow you to unmute yourself and ask your questions. So, Dr. Waqar, let's start with some basic question that is basically for the researchers and the students. That when the majority of the economists say that free trade is the best for welfare, they usually base their analysis on the framework where there is no externality and there is no strategic interaction. However, in the world we live in, we see that actions of one country do have an impact on the lives of the citizen living in other countries, especially if they are trading partners. In such interconnected world, do you still see that free trade is the best thing for maximizing welfare, consumer as well as producer welfare?
Okay, so I think quite a few points to talk about. First, let's think about what does free trade mean? Is it really like a free movement of goods and services? And then, of course, the other side of it is relatively mobile capital. The money moves from one economy to another economy. And I mean, just to see, like, if you ask me in 2-3 words, is yes, it's, I mean, openness to trade is welfare improving. It still is welfare improving. I will try to take you back towards the exchange economy, you know, the initial idea of think about just the individuals. They are having certain endowments and they are efficient in producing certain goods, but they also need other goods. So that's really like a basic 101 exchange economy. And what that exchange economy taught us is that you can improve your welfare by exchanging goods for whom someone else is having, let's say, the more value or is willing to offer more for what you are possessing, for example. So I think same applies to trade in a way. And I think somehow one of the things that over the years we see that discussions around free trade or generally around the trade are kind of diverted towards firms or the industries only, as if the main objective or the broader goal of any free trade is benefiting just the firms, and then of course indirectly its workers or the shareholders. I think one big missing link in that discourse is that trade, at the end of the day, benefits consumers, and trade is welfare enhancing for consumers. So you think about any two countries, and whenever they open for the trade, what the consumers get are a couple of things very quickly. Like one is they get more variety of goods. These goods or services might not be offered in their country. They often find these cheaper from other destinations. So you can think about, let's say, the American consumers finding goods produced in China cheaper, so their affordability and their welfare goes up. So I think the broader objective of any openness to trade or any trade policy is having more consumer welfare. That is, at the end of the day, very important. The discourse has diverted because we find rather immediate impacts on what happens to the, you see the manufacturing or what happens to the services sector, and we think that that is the end of the story. So it is not. So I still believe like having fewer restrictions to trade is welfare improving, and for consumers, definitely, like you get a bigger basket of choices now, you get better quality, you get at lower prices. But even for firms, if you think about that, trade is an important tool to improve efficiency, to be more innovative. For example, you become part of knowledge networks, you learn not only about technologies, but you learn about those soft skills, let's say the managerial skills and so forth. So firms, the firms that engage in international trade, normally they benefit from such kind of a knowledge flows that we know very well. Firms also immensely benefit from openness to trade by having their intermediate goods that are now of a better standard, again having a more variety and also relatively cheaper. If you dig deeper into most of the economies, you would find that they're the major import basket is basically these intermediate goods. And especially last 2-3 decades, when there is a rise of global value chains, we know that it's every country is adding certain value to these global goods, you could call them, and they are importing the initial stages, for example. So having more access or better access to other countries normally helps you accessing these capital, more varieties of these capitals and intermediate goods, and also better quality and at lower prices that we could think about. So they benefit. It's the second point that I say. The third, of course, you could also think about that it helps you actually filter out inefficient firms, because think like you put in some tariffs on imports, or you close your economy for any particular reason. It normally has two effects. One effect is, which we often see, the direct, that you impose tariffs on someone, and we always talk about the immediate impact of that tariff that it could have. But at the same time, for example, tariffs or non-tariff barriers are exactly subsidizing domestic production, or put it in differently, providing that essential oxygen to otherwise not very inefficient firms that are in your country. So often we have seen that openness to then trade and having more trade normally helps you, having more efficient domestic production rather than less efficient domestic production. So in that way also it helps. What has happened, like, do we have strategic interaction? Of course, I mean, again, taking back you to the micro, very basic micro, that exchange economy is always about the strategic interactions. So we do have strategic interactions. We do have a fair share of politics, like when openness becomes a dominant policy, who pushes for that, and then who benefits for it. I mean, there is a very good evidence suggesting that there is a considerable heterogeneity in terms of returns or the benefits that countries have got after the the free trade agreements or the after the WTO, for example. And most of these countries are not actually low-income countries or not the global south, but more what we call the global north. These countries are immensely benefited. But of course, there are other countries that learned over the time and they become part of this process. And of course, one big candidate that we are talking these days is China, starting from the global south and then really upping to move up to the global value chains, not only in that is one particular sector or the good, but in a number of sectors. So then, of course, there are certain structural changes then taking place in the partner countries, let's say the partner countries of China or partner countries of any firm that is coming from the global south. And that has repercussions, that has some implications for the host firms. They have also implications for the host firms or the enterprises, and they do then exert their pressure. They lobby for protection, could be just by imposing tariffs, or could be non-tariff barriers, or could go actually, at the bigger scale, like the recent Trump tariff drive. But to sum it up again, having more access to trade is better, is welfare improving for consumers as well as for firms.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Waqar. So what I understood from you is that despite strategic interactions, political factors, and other foreign policy related issues, consumers enjoy more goods at cheaper prices, and firms benefit from networks. That is, they learn good managerial practices, products, services, get cheaper inputs, all because of free trade. And then at macro level, the trade is efficiency improving, not strictly macro, micro as well. And it helps structural transformation of the economy and thus creates better jobs. And moving on, as you mentioned about China, so my next question is about US-China trade and their issues. For example, we often hear from the US that China keeps its currency at an exchange rate below the market level and thus takes undue advantage of US market. Moreover, before the current phase of tariff war, China was more protective of its market than US in bilateral trade. So in this context, when US President announced tariffs, some people believed that this would actually result in reducing protections as countries would negotiate with US, leading to overall low tariffs in future. What are your views on this argument that these tariffs, despite their immediate negative impact, might lead to reduction in global protectionism and bring all those benefits that you just talked about?
Okay, so I'll put 3 points. So point number 1 is, again, we need to change the lenses. If I see from the lenses of, let's say, the manufacturers or the industries, not even the services of USA, then what you're saying about the cheaper yuan makes a huge sense. But if you think from the consumer's lenses, then it is actually opposite. From the cheaper yuan, one benefits is the US consumer. US importers, they find Chinese products cheaper, their welfare goes up, and they are better off. So this is one thing. And Chinese importers are actually worse off because they will find foreign goods expensive for them, and they will be consuming less of foreign goods. So I think if it's just a two-way lenses that we have to see, that if I see from the consumer's point of view, then having a cheaper yuan is good for American than for Chinese. Okay, this is one thing. Of course, I don't want to see it just from the partial lenses. We could also see that what implications it could have for the industries or for the manufacturing or the services in the USA as well. That will be an important factor also. So if you want to see the overall benefit, then one has to see also about the losses that any currency manipulation is making in, let's say, in US in the case of China. So there we could see that, okay, where does Chinese advantage come from, for example? And is it just the cheaper currency advantage, or it has something to do with what China can offer? What is its, the capacity or the basket of goods that they are able to offer, how efficiently they can produce those goods. And of course, the third factor, which is also very important factor, is that how does the structural changes taking place in USA are contributing to that as well. So it's a mix of the three. For the producer, I'm saying, for the consumer, I already told you, like, who will be benefiting from it is basically American consumer. So thinking about the second one, for example, China's advantage is a well studied now. Is not primarily coming from the exchange rate manipulation, So China's advantage, and there are many studies that show, is producing goods at relatively cheaper rates, which means more efficiency that we could think about. And that efficiency is a driving force, And they have really moved up the technological ladder that you could think about. So there are many indicators that you could think about. So if you just go 2 decades back even, and you look at the export complexity index of China versus Russia, you find there's a big difference between the two. But if you look at the more recent, what you find is that they are pretty much same at the complexity level. So the China has also moved up the technological ladder that we could think about. So moving up the technological ladder also means that they'll be able to offer newer products or newer services. At the same time, they are efficient also in producing those things. That is a bigger factor, I think, rather than having the cheaper yuan giving Chinese manufacturers advantage over the US manufacturers. The third factor that I was saying is also very important, is the structural change in USA taking place. In a structural change in USA, US's economy has moved from manufacturing towards services or the high-end services. So even now, when we think about the trade or the tariffs, we primarily focus on manufacturing because this is where US wants us to focus, but we don't focus on the services where USA runs surplus with most of the countries. So that is a transition in USA from manufacturing towards the high-end services. But of course, for any transition, there will be winners and there will be losers, and maybe this is not the same group, which is very important, I think, to identify. Because for high-end services, it's more high-skilled kind of a labor force that has benefited. And then we have a lot of evidence suggesting that over the last 2-3 decades, there is increase in inequality, and inequality also within the workers, where skilled workers have benefited from this transition, and semi-skilled or unskilled workers are left behind in terms of their incomes. So I think that has something to do with US industrial policies and how are they able to take care of those who are losing out in the process. And these are normally the people who were associated previously with the manufacturing, and losing out manufacturing jobs could create that kind of a pressure. So to me, it has more to do with the later two factors. One is China's improvement in efficiency and technological upgradation, and second, the structural shift in USA taking place, where they started to specialize more in services rather than in manufacturing. And if you see from that point of view, then again, one answer that will be very clear when you ask about whether the Trump's tariffs would bring manufacturing back to USA, it seems very unlikely, because that's not going to happen actually.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Waqar, especially for bringing in the consumer
Just
perspective as.
Yeah, just one. Sorry,
Sorry,
Nadeem. Sorry, Nadeem. One other
sorry.
point.
Please go ahead.
I think you were right when you talk about. I think you made also this point that China was having more tariffs on average than USA, so it's a more protectionist than the USA. So if I think about again the 20 years back, we're talking about on average tariffs in China around 9 to 10%, and we're talking about USA where average tariffs around 2%, for example. But that gap has shrunk, and more recently they were pretty close to each other actually. With these new changes, it will be very different, So the base tariff in USA is 10%, but they came very closer actually. And I think an economy like China's, which was expanding, they will gain more from reducing tariffs than imposing higher tariffs.
Okay. Thank you. And especially, I was thanking you for bringing in the consumer perspective, as this is often missed, especially when the firms can lobby through the Chamber of Commerces and other organizations. They can lobby for themselves. But of course, the consumer perspective is often missed. And you highlighted its benefits in terms of getting cheaper goods for US as well as for Chinese and for the better jobs as well. Now, before our next questions, which are more focused on South Asian economies, please allow me a few minutes to give the audience a bit background of USA South Asia trade. Uh, the US maintains significant trade relationship with South Asian countries, with India being the most prominent partner, and it exports pharmaceutical, textile, and IT services to US, and it imports aircrafts, machinery, and some of the agriculture products from the US. The other important South Asian countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, their textile industry mainly relies on the US market. So most of the textile exports are in US. So US holds a very special relationship with all these South Asian countries, and any policy change from the US will definitely impact these countries. Uh, and besides textile, US also is an export destination for some of the low-end IT services as well as for the agriculture. Now, my question is, how do you think that this tariff war, which basically started from US-China trade tensions, will and the resultant tariffs that were announced by President Trump will affect the possibility of regional trade and investment flows within South Asia and various sectors of South Asian economies, such as textile, technology, agriculture, etc.?
Okay, so I mean, you rightly mentioned if you think about in South Asia and three biggest economies, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, for three of them, they're the single largest export destination is USA. For Pakistan and Bangladesh, it's primarily ready-made garments and the apparel sector. For India, it's more about gems and I think the diamonds and the related products. But there's a huge difference actually if you look at. So India is by far the biggest partner, having around $77 billion of trade last year. So definitely they will be, I think, mostly affected, not only because of the volume of the trade, but also because as compared to Pakistan or Bangladesh, uh, uh, pre-Trump tariffs, India was having around, like, I think the effective tariff rate of around 2% only. So it was even significantly less than Pakistan or Bangladesh. So I think that is the one aspect of it to think about, that they will be affected. But there are multiple layers I think we should be considering or we should be taking into account. One layer is that uh, so it's a biggest partner for all of them. So we understand implications for all these three countries, at least three big countries. But as I told you, that their main products are slightly different. I mean, we often think that India competes with Pakistan and Bangladesh for textiles and apparel, for example. They do. But in the case of USA, their main products, top 2, 3, are not actually these products. So there, the elasticity would definitely, I mean, the immediate implications one could think about is that whose elasticity is higher, and we often think textiles or the garments have relatively high elasticity. So if, for example, price goes up, then consumers will not be purchasing as much as they were doing before. So this is the immediate effect that one could see, that maybe at a different degree, but we will see, because of rise in tariff, demand for these goods in USA is going to go down. This is the immediate effect that we could see. There's also income effect that one should think about, that in USA tariffs are across the board, and in certain cases, like in the case of China, is very high. So is, for example, in Cambodia, Vietnam, or East Asian countries, the rates are pretty high. So you could think about some negative income shock taking place back in USA that will have, again, impact on the demand for these goods that we are producing. So overall, I think there will be a substantial shock that I could see taking place. But what has happened post announcement is that Trump administration has given this pause and is willing to negotiate. I think India was the first, I think one of the first, that started these trade negotiations and new agreement talks. They haven't finalized yet. But again, what can these countries offer? So far we've seen 2 trade agreements. I think one is with UK, pretty closer with the China that we could see. So some of the things are pretty there. So the US administration doesn't want to touch on the services sector. They are interested in only talking about the manufacturing sector. They are also not interested in talking about the 10% base tariff. So that is going to be there. Beyond that, which they call the reciprocal rate. So the negotiations are all about that reciprocal rate, which is also like you have seen, many have seen that the formula that generates that is not that good either. So that reciprocal rate is the negotiation, the tool or the objective that you could think about. So we have seen the news that India is willing to offer 0 rate tariffs. We have seen Pakistan is willing to offer 0 rate tariffs. So maybe there will be some improvement that you could think about. But I think like the way the tariff structures or the tariff policy this time is conceived in USA is benefiting, or is going to benefit, again, the USA in a bilateral agreement. And not just bilateral, I mean, there is something unique this time is happening, that even USA is not interested in a bilateral trade agreement. They are specifically going at the product level. So it's not like we talk about the average tariff rate that is going to be for all the goods, but that is really at a product level. So for this product, this is going to be the tariff rate, and for other product, this is unique. I think we haven't seen something like this. We do have certain variations with the bundles of goods you could think about. So this is where I think they have the strength, and they can gain from any negotiations that are going to take place there. So this is the part of the game that is going to happen with the USA. So they will end up paying receiving 10% plus some tariff, which will be different at different products. The second aspect, I think, where again India will be mostly affected as compared to Bangladesh or Pakistan, is that one aspect of these negotiations is that how are we going to reduce the Chinese content in the global value chains. So it's not just how much we import from India, let's say, but also what fraction of the value added in that Indian product is coming from China. So now here there is a difference, because if you are sending ready-made garments from India or from Pakistan, there isn't a bigger share of Chinese input into it. But if you're sending iPhone from India, you're exporting iPhone from the India, then there is a big of relatively bigger. I mean, still the USA has the biggest share even in the value added of the iPhone, but relative to what other goods we are talking about, there is more content of Chinese input into it. So I think that this is where the rates will be negotiated, and not only the rates, but also how to reduce the Chinese content in the global value chain. This is with respect to USA. Coming back towards your main question, that would that lead to more trade within South Asia? Okay, so again, one example is exchange economy. Do we have much to offer to each other? Do we produce really different goods? And are we in a position to offer, for example, bigger or a better market to these countries? I think there is a limitation, because when you think about high-end market, high-income market, where you could get a better rates, for example, often people think about USA, think about Europe, or some of the emerging countries, including maybe China. But that kind of a potential within the South Asia, like India exporting to Pakistan or Bangladesh, are limited, you know. And the same is case for Pakistan, or same is case for India, because when we compare Pakistani garments manufacturer having certain advantages vis-a-vis a manufacturer in USA, that's why we are able to offer at a cheaper price these garments to consumers. But that might not be true when you talk about, let's say, India, or you talk about Bangladesh. And I think it will be the same way. But this is I think this is not a kind of a big scope that we could think about. But on top of it, then there is a bigger layer, which is a political layer. And I think situation is not that great, you know, not just India, Pakistan, but also India or Bangladesh, and the things that are changing in Bangladesh. We also saw macroeconomic turmoil in Sri Lanka as well. So those things also would come into play. So I don't see, at least in the near future, that when losing out from the US market, there will be more trade between the South Asian or among the South Asian economies that we could think about. In fact, what I do see is that there will be more cutthroat competition for the European market also. So if Pakistani manufacturers and Bangladeshi manufacturers and the Indian manufacturers are going to face high tariffs in USA, they might actually look for the other market, which is European market. And then in European market, all of them are going to compete for the similar goods. Of course, as I said, that India has relatively better basket to offer, not just in terms of the variety of goods that it could offer, but also in terms of complexity. So India, again, produces goods that are relatively not relative, quite complex as compared to Pakistani or Bangladeshi goods.
Okay. So let me share with Dr. Waqar, with yourself and with the audience, that PRISA, the Policy Research Institute for South Asia, is our newly established think tank. It is formed by some friends of mine, and of course, I'm also a part of its team. So we are really keen about playing our part in South Asian integration across trade, cultural exchange, and responding to climate change. So my questions are especially related to South Asia, given this perspective. Now, Dr. Waqar, given your deep research on the firms, how the Trump tariffs are likely to impact firms, especially their production strategies, innovation ecosystem, and of course, countries' long-term growth trajectories that we all economists do care about. Dr. Waqar, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know. My system somehow restarted itself. It didn't like my talk, so while it's restarting,
we are keen to listen to you. So forget your system. Just keep on.
Yeah, so I mean, it restarted and it said me we are updating, so it's up to them. It's but I'm with
Now,
you on, and as soon as it restarts, I will start on my other device.
okay. So should we take a little pause, or should I repeat the question and you can continue from this?
Yeah, please continue. So I think we were done
Okay,
with the
okay.
last question, so you could go ahead with the next.
Okay. So, Dr. Waqar, meanwhile, I just give a short introduction of PRISA, which is a new think tank aims to work for the South Asian integration across trade, cultural exchange, and responding to climate challenges. And my next question to you will be based as you have done a lot of work on the firms. So how do you think the Trump tariffs are likely to impact firms, their production strategies, innovation ecosystem, and of course, countries' long-term growth trajectories?
Yeah, in a several ways, actually, it's something really big. So I consider, even like think about Pakistan, it's not really a big exporting country, but even in the case of Pakistan, the impact is going to be pretty substantial. And there are many reasons to think about why that will be substantial. Some of those I already talked about, like let's say what is happening to a demand side in USA or the income shock in USA, or the other markets I talked about, the general equilibrium impact. We could think about that there will be heightened competition in European market as well. So disruptions are taking place, and these disruptions are normally are going to adversely affect firms that are, especially the firms that are exporting to USA or exporting to Europe. So this is the one immediate that what we think about. But I think the two big impacts that we've already seen. One impact that is that like as I mentioned that even the negotiations are at the product level rather than at the country level. So this has really disrupted the supply chains that one could think about. So it's not just the one country or the one firm, but these firms they rely on their networks. These networks could be importers. These networks could be suppliers of basic inputs. So when there are differential tariffs or when the negotiations are going to be about how much of the Chinese content is there or how much of another country's content is there, I think a number of these supply chain disruptions have already taken place. And these networks are really, I mean, difficult to build. You need trust. Trust is developed over the time, and that trust then brings an advantage for you, and you can move from one product to another product depending on what are your partners, for example. So in this case, what has happened is that when you are losing on those partners, or those partners might be looking for other partners, other countries, or other manufacturers, then you will even have a setback. For example, if you want to change your product space, even so that thing that is already taking place. Uh, we have seen that affecting a number of farms already. The third is, of course, the uncertainty that's bringing. So the uncertainty is already there. The uncertainty is that whether the global WTO order will persist or now this is a new norm where every country will be going into bilateral or even the product negotiations, for example. And of course, the bigger the economy is, more say they have, try to adopt those kind of policies. So that has brought uncertainty, and one reason for that uncertainty is also that like previous strategies of countries like China was that when you impose heavy tariffs on us or non-tariff barriers, then we are going to move to other countries. We are going to dislocate, for example, they went to the East Asian countries. But this time, the East Asian countries are also target. So there's then this uncertainty that what next now? We go to different markets, or we face like similar kind of consequences. It's just a matter of time. So that uncertainty is also going to affect firms pretty badly. So I see like overall firms are going to be affected. majority of the firms are going to be affected through competition, through lower demand, through disruptions in their supply chains, and also uncertainty that say that whether to relocate or not. Having said that, disruption of this level creates huge opportunities as well. So when the disruption is taking place, disruption is not just taking place in a one line of production or one good or two goods. Basically, this is taking place in a number of goods, and it's taking place not just in the largest economy in USA, but in many other economies as well, including China or including European Union. So such disruptions often create opportunities, and these opportunities are very important. So firms in South Asia, where they're facing this uncertainty and they're facing this adverse shock, at the same time have an opportunity. Governments in these countries have an opportunity to come up with industrial policies or the industrial policies to get benefit from this disruption and take an advantage of the space which is created. Remember, I was saying you like space. It's very difficult actually to get space because these supply chains that take longer time. They are built on the basis of trust. Of course, the cost effectiveness is always there. So it's very difficult to be part of such chains. And what this disruption has done is that now it has opened up those kind of the chains where a new entrants can enter. And I think like many manufacturers in Pakistan or Bangladesh or India, that how can we benefit from this new space that is created? And it will then all boil down to how ready they are, how much they are willing to take the risk, for example. I've done most of my work on Pakistani manufacturers. Unfortunately, they don't seem ready because they are not into those kind of radical products or the high value products that we could think about. But this is a golden opportunity for them as well, that they can immensely benefit by diversifying their product, diversifying their businesses, and they must take some risk.
Unfortunately, Nadim's system is not working. So he texted me and he said that means his screen switched off and he was asking, is the session going on? So he was surprised for it. So in the meantime, when Nadim would come back, so he will take charge. So I'm going to ask one question, taking advantage of this situation. Means I'm reading the literature mainly about international trade and all these things. And I'm also a big fan of free trade. But I have realized one thing, that we economists, sometimes we are very biased, and mostly we think about like the welfare gain in international trade, especially relevant to the consumers. But on the other hand, when we talk about this issue with political scientists, so they disagree with us. Mainly they say that free trade is not producing positive outcome for society, especially when they talk about inequality and especially when they talk about the economic transformation, like the people are moving from one sector to another sector. So that's the reason, according to them, the populism and means, for example, the politics again, tariff is emerging. On the other hand, when we look at, for example, the countries means which cross, like they were at the lower income status and now they're middle or the higher income status, we also realize that so they had some kind of industrial policy. For example, if we look at the South Korea, if we look at now the Taiwan and China and Singapore, so they were that time when the world was like of embracing free trade, they were more like protectionist, and especially the protectionist in terms of For some key industries, they were protectionist, and some key industries, they were following free trade. Like they were more focused on the product-based for international trade policy rather than just making the whole economy free. So the current situation, what we are facing is that what you said, and that's I also agree with it. So not only the bilateral trade agreements are emerging, also the product-based trade agreements are also emerging. So in this situation means the job of developing countries is becoming very, very difficult, means rationalizing like what kind of economic policy or trade policy is needed, especially when they're facing the knowledge problem. They don't know what is working and what is not working. And you know that one policy takes some time to give results. So the developing countries, because they don't have institutional capacity, it's very hard for them to find out what's working and what's not working. The other problem is like means when the global trade is protectionist and or the global trade is becoming more like the tariff friendly, and in that situation there is a local demand for the local firm, like they should also be protected. So in developing countries there would be a demand for the local firms that if the world is going for tariff and they are also facing the tariff in international trade, so they should also be protected. So in all this context, my question is that what do you advise what the developing countries should do related to the South Asia?
Okay, so I mean, first of all, I think there is a merit in this point when we say that are there people that are losing out in the process? Absolutely, there are people that are losing out in the process. So you think about expansion of USA, and then this entire idea of USA losing out in the manufacturing race. So there were people that maybe lost jobs. There were the businessmen that lost their businesses and so forth. So we do have that negative impact, but I don't know why I see it from the lenses of being negative. As I was saying in my introduction as well, is that I'm more productive and I can the sale things that are more expensive that can give me higher income, and I could benefit more from it, for example. So, I mean, if you think about individual groups gains and group losses, there is a merit how we use it. You think about an economy, I think again we go back to an economy, then you need to sum that up. So you have to sum up that, okay, if USA lost manufacturing, did they gain somewhere? And if they didn't gain anywhere, then you're absolutely right. Like, okay, let's think about the trade is a bad thing. I'm not using deliberately word free trade. I mean, it has never been free. A lot of constraints have gone down, but it's not absolutely free anywhere. Now let's take another situation. Is that we go to the opposite. We follow Trump's idea, or this idea that, okay, we should have just the nationalist kind of development strategy where we establish our own industries and we should produce our own things. Could we do that? Could we think about economies, let's say even big economies like China or like USA? Can they afford or can they ensure prosperity without importing from other countries? And I doubt that is going to happen either, because these inputs that you are using that are mainly because of that free trade are very vital. And without these, I don't see any even the nationalistic kind of a development strategy going to prosper. That is not the case. Are the barriers or the tariffs always bad? I mean, in most of the cases, that's how we see, but sometimes there are some genuine cases. Many people, they say, like infant industry is used very widely, but of course, you know that the industrial organization, international industrial organization, is not in a perfect competition either. So we have firms that have market power, and you want to protect your firms or your consumers against that market power. You do have room for certain tariffs or certain non-tariff barriers that you could bring in. But I think even from the political economy point of view, or from any point of view, like when you think about having more access to goods, having lower prices goods, for example, would always improve one's welfare. And same is even for the industries. Even you think about the domestic industries, why should domestic industries just be producing for the local market? And if you dig deeper into it, that look like, what if Apple was only producing for a limited USA market, even though it's a very big market, it's the biggest market in the world, but still the returns from those innovations would have been not as big as the returns when you have the global market. So for any technological progress, any new market that is going to be created or that will be created in future, this access to larger market is important. That brings in that economies of scale, that brings the cost down, that motivate firms to take risk and come up with the products that are really new to the world. What should the developing countries they do? I think many countries, such as Pakistan, for example, we do not benefit from the globalization that much, So we are not exporting much. We have restrictions on imports. If you would look at our restrictions on imports, they are way more than, for example, the US's restrictions on imports. So we haven't benefited from that. So we missed that opportunity, you could think about. And could countries benefit, countries like us, from the homegrown, just the domestic or the nationalistic kind of production? I don't see that either. So the problems, the structural problems that kind of constrained our growth or our prosperity when the world was opening would also be limiting our progress, even if we just think about the domestic market. But I think numbers are not that correct either, because many of our countries have way more higher tariffs and non-tariff barriers. I think people living in Pakistan can tell you how terrible automobiles are here, and how we are protecting that sector for a long time. So I think, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm an economist. Maybe you could consider that bias being there, but from any point of view, limiting one to just domestic production is going to result in a lesser prosperity and less than the potential that countries and the individuals can have.
Okay, Dr. Waqar, can you listen to me?
Very well.
Okay. I also lost my connection. So meanwhile, I requested Zishan, and thanks for jumping in, Zishan. So let me continue with my two questions, and then we can open the forum for two questions and answer from rest of the audience as well. Just as you pointed that in the very start of your talk, and that the international trade leads to firms making partnerships and networks across the globe or across the borders and respond to the challenges and pursue the opportunities jointly. So given this, how likely it is that firms in South Asian countries, and especially those firms that are working in these sectors, which are most likely to be negatively impacted by the recent Trump tariff hikes, will come together and form strategic partnerships? Also let me add to this. Let's consider that we are living in the world pre-7th May, so that this recent India-Pakistan clash. Let's get back to this.
Okay, even in that world, we were not that good either. So cannot go that back. I mean, it was a big shock for many of us, I think, living in this part of the world. Of course, they can benefit. They can benefit. There are these synergies among different firms that we see. As I say, like especially with Bangladesh, Pakistan, we are more like producing in the same sector. So maybe the less synergy in terms of vertical integration kind of a thing. Maybe we need more manufacturers of machinery or the chemicals or the man-made fiber, for example, that could benefit us. So for that, we need external links, not just our countries, but external links. They can benefit, but again, it really limits your state. So when we are thinking about the world as a whole, then we are thinking about any player anywhere in the world with whom we could actually form an alliance, or who could be our client, or who could be our supplier, for example, or could also be our partner. Maybe at certain stages of the production are done by that manufacturer. So whenever you will limit, I think it will be suboptimal outcome. It's not the optimal outcome. And then with the new world order, if you say that, okay, then not only there is a limit on this, but you have to limit the Chinese involvement in that one, for example, or by force, because there are countries that are facing way more higher tariffs. So you will be forced to actually move those value chains where those countries are involved, or they are exporting directly to USA. That is again going to limit the set of network or the set of players you could engage with. So I think they should look for it, but again, it's a suboptimal level. But where they could look at, maybe the global south would be relatively bigger set where they could look at not just the South Asia, but looking at the emerging economies where income levels are really going up, that they are opening up the markets, including, let's say, to China or some of the East Asian countries, or Brazil, for example, or Middle East is another market. So I think thinking about the global south would be at least like better than just thinking like we should just collaborate within South Asia.
Okay. And my last question, at least from my side, that from political economy and institutional perspective, what policy responses do you suggest South Asian governments should consider for renegotiating with US or responding to this challenge imposed by tariff shocks to their firms, consumers, and overall economy? Are there any specific institutional reforms that you could suggest?
Yes, there would be. I mean, negotiations are going to be tough. I could see maybe, the post incidents, maybe the Trump is saying they will have some, they'll offer some benefits to us or to India, but I don't see really like much benefit coming because of that. So I think negotiation part is, we don't have really much to offer. What we could do, one thing which I think Pakistan is doing, or India is going to offer, is at least look at our own tariff structure, try to make it better. Most of the tariff policies, the tariff rates in these countries are driven by lobbies, driven by families. In Pakistan's case, just recently I was reading one research saying that politically connected firms were able to get higher tariffs, for example, than the firms that are not politically connected. So get that house in order, reduce the tariffs. That will help your consumers more, and let the exchange rate fluctuate. Let it be relatively what we say the free, so that you don't take that much pressure off that as well. What they could do, I think, where we are missing is a big time is having the directed industrial policy. The industrial policy which really looks at all these openings that are taking place. So let's not just confine ourselves to, since we've been exporting textiles, and textile is our forte, and then everything else is for someone else. So we have to incentivize actually firms in any possible way to try to take on that space which is opening up because of this change in the global order that is taking place. So I think specifically where I would say that, okay, you could target the sectors, for example, that are relatively less price elastic, or that are relatively less likely to experience a capital movement. So if you compare, for example, even now, after imposing high tariffs on China, then USA gave concession for certain sectors. And that concession for certain sectors was because of the nature of those sectors, whereas industries like ready-made garments or the textile, they are very easy. If the foreign buyer is facing high tariff from here, they will switch just from Pakistan to another market. And then if they find it higher, the capital will fly to another market. But when you think about, let's say, the electronics, that might not be the case because you don't have many other places where you will find that ecosystem where you can actually manufacture electronics. So really target those kind of things, A, where there is a high value added, and B, where it is relatively more stable, or you can keep the capital for a long run. I would say, like, really work on, I don't have any specific sector now, but work on all the sectors that are possible, not just in the goods market, but also in the services market, and see that these are the set of goods and services that we want to produce, and we want to be competitive in these. Our idea of any industrial policy is not to protect these industries that might be inefficient, but our idea is actually to promote these who could compete internationally and can bring in those dollars that we look for also.
Okay, Dr. Waqar, thinking within constraints and optimization. That is really hard thing, but again, for economists like us, this is our job. With this, let me invite Umar Saab for his question. Umar Saab, if you could please unmute yourself and ask your question that you posted in the chat.
Thank you, Nadeem Saab, and thanks a lot, Waqar Saab. It was really enlightening. I really enjoyed the talk. I'll just read from the question that I've already posted here. I'd like your opinion on the view of deglobalization, which these tariffs entail. How will the global economy readjust or reconcile to this new reality now that the Rubicon has been crossed? If one US president can upend the whole system of global trade and global supply chains, does it not sound the death knell, the death bell for the global WTO order? Shouldn't the global economies brace themselves for future upheavals? How can the global trade ever trust the international or bilateral agreements as binding again?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a big rupture there. This was uncertainty that I was talking about. So the pre-Trump, we had some signs, by the way, during the previous stunt of Trump as well. And overall, we have seen the stress coming in US market, losing on manufacturing or the middle class, or those kind of manufacturing jobs we have seen. And then if you take those the political economy lenses, and you start to think that, okay, so global order or WTO was benefiting certain countries. And I mean, there is a very good empirical research. If you look at like what were the countries that benefited the most from the globalization or free market, these are not the countries from the global south. So there is a limit to that benefit. And when the countries realize that maybe a different strategy can bring us more benefits, they might switch to it. So I think you are absolutely right that going to that global world order doesn't seem likely. Individual nationalistic kind of production, I don't see that as optimal, or that will be pursued by most of the economies. But what is very likely is the creation of new blocks, and these blocks then could play a very decisive role. So think about now, if any individual country, any individual delegation is going to go and negotiate with US administration, I doubt anyone will be gaining much from it. But if there are new blocks that are formed over the time, be the East Asian bloc or the BRICS or any other bloc from the global south, they might be in a better position. So I think I I see it like going from the global world order towards more block-based order, and it will be disruption till we reach to the new order.
Thank you very much. So we should we should be looking at turbulent times till till this order is replaced by the block-based order.
But as I said, I mean, there are opportunities out there as well, you know.
Yeah.
So we have to be clever to benefit from those opportunities. As I said, we lost the other game when it was globalization. We couldn't win. We shouldn't lose this opportunity. I think we should be very, very proactive.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So any other participant willing to ask any question, please raise your hands and go ahead with your questions.
Okay, can I intervene? My name is Manzoor. I'm having problem with raising my hand. Maybe I can see where it is.
Sir, our honor, please.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry I was a little bit late, but you know, the discussion that I've followed so far, let me comment on that. First, I think, you know, maybe 30, 40 years ago, there was a very strong concept of developing versus developed. Now that concept has considerably, I should say, disappeared, because within developing countries, you have some of the richest countries like Singapore, now China, South Korea, all these ASEAN countries, whatever macroeconomic you take, they're already gone. And you will see around the world two things. One, that countries that opened up, that means, you notice my trend, but that means that countries that started getting rid of their tariffs, they quickly became prosperous, they got rid of poverty, they lifted millions of people out of, and this, any region, you know, you for example, let me start a little bit examples, say Latin America. There were these two neighbors, Chile and Argentina. And Argentina was one of the richest countries at the time. You know, it was equal to Australia and Canada, and it was considered as one of the top countries. And then they had a very famous economist, Raul Provich, and he was a very influential guy. And he was very much for import substitution, etc. And slowly, Argentina is still stuck there. Now this president trying to change. But in the process, they started becoming poor and poor and poor. And now they are, like Pakistan, they are number one and number two on the list of borrowers from the IMF. Then you come to, you know, the Asia, you see only perhaps Myanmar, North Korea, and perhaps to a certain degree, Pakistan. They didn't engage in international trade. They kept high tariffs, etc. Pakistan, for a while, they were the first 40 years or so, when other countries were also protected, Pakistan was relatively more open. So Pakistan was doing all right. And then in the 90s, we considerably reduced tariffs, and from 95, we doubled our exports in 5 years. Then in 2001 to 2007, we again doubled our exports. But then 2008 came, that financial crisis, fuel crisis, etc. And there was some backlash against this opening up. And they put all these tariffs, regulatory duties. And from 2014, they put all these additional custom duties. And there was a video circulating, I think you might have seen, all of you would have seen it, how Pakistan versus India and their per capita income, etc. And mostly, except maybe in the 70s when we nationalized our industry, and maybe in the 80s, we for a while, we kept increasing tariffs. Otherwise, we were, in terms of per capita, etc., were ahead of them till 2008. But then we lost out. And and from 2014, we even started losing out against Bangladesh, and per capita. We have been stuck at 1,400, and those countries have doubled their per capita income. So I think personally, I think that there is no way except for going towards opening up the economy. And also, I hear some people say that yes, but it brings inequality. But if you look at these countries, for example, Vietnam, poverty rates before they started opening up was about 80%, and now it's 0%. So that means that it brought more equality. Obviously, there'll be some people who will become richer than others, but because everybody is now consumers are better off, so it brought more equality. Um, Now there was one other point which was being discussed was about Trump's tariffs. Yes, I think, and what we should do. I mean, I'm on that committee for Trump's tariffs, and we are handling it through I should say three aspects. One is tariffs. So perhaps we are asked, what we import from US is soybean, cotton, some aircraft, some vaccines. These are our major imports. So we are kind of offering US, okay, you can have it at zero, but since we cannot give you unless we have an FTA, we cannot give you bilaterally. So we are going to reduce these items of your export interest to zero. That's the tariff things. And then when Trump was declaring those tariffs, he also said that there's a big list of non-tariff barriers they have noticed around various countries, and for Pakistan also they pointed out many. So we are saying what reforms we are doing already in this budget and what we will do, and we are committing to getting rid of those non-tariff barriers. I think they were particularly worried that now sometimes we allow, say, soybean, and then next year some minister or somebody changes, and then we say, no, GMO, genetically modified, cannot come in. It's same thing. I mean, we are saying that we'll provide more predictability. Now we've already decided that we'll allow that. So that's the non-tariff. And then the third point I think Trump has is that countries which are having big trade surplus vis-a-vis the US, how are they going to reduce that trade surplus? And we are saying, okay, we will try to buy more of cotton, more of soybean, maybe some more defense equipment, etc. And that's how we are going to. But in return, we expect that we will obviously go back to at least the 10% situation. But we are also asking that if 10% is removed of any other country, then we should also be considered for that. That was the Trump tariff. So just a minute, if you have, do you have a minute? I could speak about the current tariff reforms that are underway, or I've taken too long a time. Please, whoever is the host, let me know.
Sir, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay. So after considering many years that what kind of reforms we do this year, I think that for the last since the last budget, the government has been thinking that we have been stuck too long on import substitution, and instead we should do what the ASEAN did, move towards export-led growth. And we did various studies. We asked the World Bank and other international organizations, the UK Department of Trade. We also got in touch with the PIDE to do these analysis. And GTAP analysis that World Bank did for us, they said, well, if you do an ambitious tariff liberalization program, you should expect 14% annual growth in exports. That means we can double our exports every 5 years. All other indicators, there are various indicators, and they say that in every one of these, you'll be better off already, and maybe some revenue loss for the first year. But even that, when PIDE did the analysis, they said there will be no loss if you remove all these regulatory duties and additional custom duties very first year, because our country, there's so much smuggling. It is because of high tariffs, so that will come down. And these, whatever other indicator that they come out with, if you like, I can share it with you. There's 6 or 7 of them. They said that, in everything you'll do better. So the government decided that, all right, what we are going to do is over the next 4 years, 5 years, we are going to get rid of all these additional custom duties. which were started in 2014 with 1%, then 2%, then 3%, now 7% something each product. And then there were regulatory duties, which were started in 2008, but they kept increasing and now up to 90% regulatory duties. So we are trying to get rid of both in the next 2-3 years, get rid of them. Then in terms of tariffs, we had several tariff slabs, and we say, okay, we've reduced them down to only 4 slabs. There'll be 0 for mostly raw materials. Similarly, for 5%, if some semi-processed, 10%, and the final rate will be 15%, and there will be no exceptions whatsoever. So this is the yes. And one other big reform plan is that currently we have a lot of exemptions, and if you see that we collect 1,100 billion rupees from customs tariff, so about 500 billion go in exemptions. So we are getting rid of those exemptions, and bring that what we call Schedule 5, I think, and we'll bring all those tariffs. We make it transparent, bring it in the main tariff. So the import duty does not depend on who it is importing, but for everybody it will be the same. And so also we have lots of these things that, okay, if you can get a certificate from BOI or this department, that engineering department, your rate will be reduced by half or something like that. I mean, we're getting rid of all those exemptions and making it transparent. So that is what the plan is. But so far, I mean, in the last 2-3 days, even this morning, the whole day, we had this auto parts people. They come in, they said, if you reduce, our current tariffs are 35% duty, 10%, 15% regulatory duty, so much of 7% addition. This all comes to 87%. If you reduce it down to 15%, we'll all close. But the thing is, I mean, if they get rid of we feel that Pakistan's problem has been this, what they call cascading tariff, and the World Bank said in the word cascaded tariff means that you have lower duty on the raw materials, intermediate and higher duties on the finished product. And the World Bank study said that the top cascading countries are, number 1 is Egypt, number 2 is Pakistan, number 3 is Iran, I think, and then Argentina or something. These are the countries which are very poor performer in terms of exports. And they say that because of this cascaded structure, your manufacturers only focus on domestic market, and they don't want to export, because in the domestic market, due to high protection, their profit margins are in excess of 40%. But in international market, they have to compete at 5 to 10% tariffs. I mean, international market, there's no tariff, so you have to compete. But the margins are 5 to 10, and then here in the domestic market, it's 40-50% or anything, because it's closed. So consumers are going to benefit. We think that the economy is going to benefit. The employment, we did this numbers, this computer simulation, and they said 450,000 new jobs will be created and all that. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Waqar, please.
Thank you so much, Manzoor Saab. I mean, this was a talk for students, and a nice surprise to see you here. I think we interact on some of the groups. So the first part was exactly what you are echoing. I was saying there was a first question that I was telling them, the welfare gains that all the countries can have, including Pakistan. So right is spot on. I mean, everyone knows that there are huge benefits apart from certain lobbies or certain group of individuals who want more protection. And really, thank you. And thank you so much for giving us details about the initiatives. I just a couple of comments on there, 2-3 maybe. So one is, I mean, this is really good. So if we are bringing our house in orders, so at margin, we will really benefit, not only just in terms of consumer welfare, but also producing or maybe increasing our exports also. So exports I do see would increase because of two primary big channels that we are talking about. Your cost of the intermediate goods is going to go down. That is going to affect, and cascading is also in some sectors is very visible. I recall their discussions with Gonzalo some time back when they were doing this study. So that is going to happen. Now, where I would really deviate is that these kind of things, they really work on margin. That's what we know. So when the firms are indifferent really between offering in international market or in the domestic market, these kind of policies will really show an impact. And I do agree there will be some impact, maybe 14% or less than 14% growth in exports. We do see some merit in that argument. But where we I think would deviate is that the underlying problems for our export sectors are way more structural than this. And unless we take care of those, I think just the tariff policies, our openness is not going to do much. And those structural changes are really, really important. I mean, one simple example, one of my recent research that I've been doing is that you think about just the standards or the quality controls in Pakistan, for example. So when the firms are going to export, they have to strictly follow the quality controls, not just about the products, but also the labor laws, about the environment, about everything. So when you think about a firm in Pakistan, whether you should serve the domestic market or you serve the foreign market, because of all those costs associated with the compliance of these standards, the margin really becomes, the difference of the margin really becomes huge. So those kind of things that are with us are really the big problem, which primarily is that we don't have standards, domestic standards, which also means that a lot of Chinese dumping and the dumping from many other countries also, because we don't maintain our standards. At the same time, the domestic markets structure, let's say the subsidies or indirect subsidies or the tax policies, they benefit investment in certain sectors, and there are quite a few studies that people have reported there as well. So I think those are the things that we should start thinking about, that how are we going to offer or enter into the markets that are more competitive, where we can earn more. And of course, here the intensive margin that you are talking about, or a little bit extensive margin I could see, but intensive margin I do see, like, okay, input cost going down or the cascading is taken care of. So I do see some change taking place there. But I'm really glad to know that a thought process is going on, and I can wish all the best with the negotiations with the Trump team. I mean, we are very tiny partners for them. We don't export that much, just like we're talking about very few $1 billion for them. So hopefully they will be able to give us concession that we are looking for. The only concern, of course, would be what if really the negotiations are like we are seeing with maybe with the UK. How much is Chinese content in just other products? Those kind of things might complicate. But thank you so much for your input and joining us.
Dr. Waqar, with this, let me thank you. Let me also thank Dr. Manzoor Saab for sparing his time and joining us. He has always been kind. Whenever I just request him for any such thing, he spares time and joins us and shares his insights. And I'm really, really thankful to you for your wonderful talk, sharing your ideas, your research, and your knowledge with us. It has been exceeded our time, but thank you for being patient and staying with us. With this, I would like to announce the closing of this talk. We will put on its recording on the YouTube, and we'll share the link with all of the people. Thank you for spending time, and thank you. Good.
Thank you, Nadeem, and thank you everyone for your patience.